Hello, friends. This will be a short lecture on doing practical theology. And the reason for this input by me is to help you visualize and design your project, your class project, as an exercise in practical theology. Because there is an analogy between a good class project for our course in pastoral care and the very epistemological structure of practical theology. In other words, practical theology not only as a theological discipline in its own right, but especially as a way of creating knowledge. And this is what you will do with a project regardless of the specific subject, or I should say, in any and each of the subjects that you might choose. For example, practices such as visitation or praying, or a particular concern you might have with better understanding depression, or counseling cases, chaplaincy cases, and on and on. You have a list on the syllabus that you can choose from, but also you can come up with your own. So practical theology as a modern discipline is, as I already said, as a theological discipline in its own right. Negatively speaking, it means that it is not simply the application of what other real theological disciplines, biblical, theological, historical, have to offer, and then we simply apply it in practice. It's much more than that. And that understanding and that new standing in practical theology the last 30 years or so is wonderfully captured in a text by a colleague, Richard Osmer. The text is called simply Practical Theology and Introduction. And so I draw from that contribution very clear and summarize it for us in a way that I trust will also help you design, visualize, as I already said, your own project. Practical theology has 4 key tasks and dimensions that constitute its epistemological structure, with the corresponding methodology. And here on the board, I hope you can see that, I wrote observation, analysis, evaluation, application, in simple terms. In other words, there is a descriptive dimension and task. It starts with human experience, is empirically situated, contextually grounded in reality. We don't start with the scripture, we don't start with other than reality. For example, in a hospital, people suffering because they have heard a devastating diagnosis, or somebody seeking resolution as they face a serious decision concerning their newborn baby, or marital guidance. Whatever the situation might be, we start with the observation. What is going on? And move eventually to analysis. Observation is a descriptive, empirical, descriptive task. Analysis, the interpretive. We might also call it hermeneutic, par excellence task. Why is this happening? Whether it refers to the practice or to the condition that we are examining, and we have been called to care, people to care in connection with that condition. Third, there is an evaluative or normative task and dimension that we might simply put it as in what should be going on? What is the best practice here? Or what is the way forward under the circumstances? And finally, application, what might also be called the pragmatic and strategic task and dimension of practical theology. As in, what works and why, of course. And what is our plan for the next steps? So, returns to real life, contextually experienced and reflected upon. A simple example, and briefly, praying for somebody who just suffered a traumatic loss. I mentioned this morning that in our own family experience, we had that in August, as recently as August. So the observation and the description will have to do with experiences of praying and people praying for us, or are praying for those people in a visit, for example, at home or in a hospital. Right? So describing what is going on. Followed by the analysis. Now, why? Why is it? Why is it that prayer might be helpful? When and how people would expect prayer? When it happens that they cannot pray, and why? And practical theology is not only contextually situated and grounded in reality, but it's also interdisciplinary in nature. So, when and how is prayer necessary or rejected, or people simply cannot pray? How can we understand that both psychologically and spiritually, as far as experience of faith is concerned, but also theological? What happens with lament, for example? So that leads us to the third task or dimension, which is the evaluative, normative. Is there such thing as a better prayer or a worse form of prayer? Of course there is. It's very important to know when and how to pray well from both a psychological and a theological point of view, on how when we can say it has theological integrity, what is that we communicate together with caring for people? What kind of meaning, what kind of understanding? Is it that this is related, this is God's judgment? Is it that the person must be responsible somehow for the condition and the situation? Or is it rather that God is lamenting together with them? I would think that the latter is much better, appropriate, theologically speaking, kind of understanding. So that is what it goes on in regard to the evaluation, the normative dimension. And finally, we draw principles. Principles understood simply as dependable guides to the practice of ministry, caregiving ministry in this case. So what have we learned and how we're planning to use that in the future in our own ministry practice. So this, friends, is the basic understanding of the epistemological and also methodological nature of practical theology. And that is something that you are expected to do and will be helped to do as you think of an interesting focus for your own study. And of course, we'll help each other along the way to make it fun, enjoyable, and especially useful. So I look forward to helping you with that.